just introduce Rob for a second. Rob and I used to work at Airbnb back when things were getting started in Singapore, back on 148 Neil Road, I think, yeah. And Rob was on the Northeast Asia team. I was on the Southeast Asia team. And later on, Rob started a company called Heighten, which was, I believe, an incubator. And since then, he's been working mostly out of China, I believe, with some trips back to the U.S. Rob, I consider actually, Rob, I think you're younger than me, right? Are you? Yeah, okay.
31.
Rob is younger than me, but I consider him a mentor because whenever I have a conversation with him, I go like, really? And then later, a few years later, I realize, hey, Rob's right? And I was just telling Vidi, Rob, about the idea about people that work in your company need to believe your vision. There's no compromise on that. So yeah, that part I remember you told me. I was like, oh, okay. And then yeah, over experience, I realized how true that is. But okay, Vidi, I'll let you introduce yourself to Rob as well. Yeah.
Right. Good evening. Hi, Rob. My name is Vidiskiu. I am the revenue manager / internal tools or data scientist in Bukit Vista. I am a graduate from computer science in UGM, one of the University in Indonesia. And yeah, I guess that's it. Nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you, man.
Okay, so Rob, what I'm hoping to do right now is actually, so this crisis is kind of shit, and well, okay, this is getting recorded, but okay, we'll probably blur that out. But the crisis is sort of slowing business down, so we're kind of taking this time to do some research and development. And in general, we've been going around learning a lot from experts. So one of the discussions that came up was about, hey, can we bring Bukit Vista to China? I listened to your podcast, actually. I listened to it twice. And then I thought, maybe not such a good idea, considering the local competition and also the, there's no benefit for foreigners as there used to be. But I'm also still curious about some other things, and I was hoping to ask you some questions at that, and I put the questions right here so that you can kind of get some warning up ahead. Okay, so I guess the first thing I really wanted to ask you was this: what do you think is really going on between China and the U.S. and how does it really feel like when you're actually in China to this process?
That's a lot to unpack, man. But I can share some dimensional thoughts.
Okay.
Look, I think that, and without getting too political or philosophical for that matter about this topic, I would just say that in my personal opinion, there's been so much information of it readily available to people, and more importantly, a lot of this information comes with baggage, meaning that information is loaded already. So depending on who you get your information from, where you get your information, when you get your information from, you could at any given time be living in like a half a dozen different echo chambers, right? So I think it's very important for people in doing business, but also just as a citizen for your own country, especially in China and America, to really practice critical thinking.
I agree. Yeah, agree.
Yeah. So that's what I'll start with. That's what the foundation. But beyond that, let's get back to business. I think that there's a really strong distinction to be made here. The first distinction is that when you talk about as an individual looking at the geopolitical relationships between East and West, yes, you're getting a lot of information. You don't know who to believe and all that crap. Yeah. And there's a lot of stigmatization, and I fully get it. And I personally believe that there's going to be increased racism to people in the coming years, and if not longer. But that distinction ends when it comes to money. I
think that's good. That's good. Good
stuff. Yeah. Okay. Because our business is about expansion, and it's about helping companies make more money, unlocking new markets, right? So I've talked to probably 36 different founders of post-A round companies out of both Europe and North America, mostly, and maybe a few from Southeast Asia. A lot of these are mass consumer-facing brands. I would say 20% of them are enterprise or B2B businesses, but for the most part, they're all brands. So they sell some sort of product that they made, right?
Got it.
And they all want to come into China. Why? Because not just because the purchasing power is increasing, consumer consumption is increasing. It's very simple. It's because they want to act. They need access to larger marketplaces to increase revenues. So from a board of director perspective, when you think about companies coming into China or Chinese companies leaving China and going to new markets, that distinction of stigmas stops. Meaning that, hey, I can feel one way, but at the same time, I need to make more money.
Got it.
Yeah.
I kind of remember this quote from God. Why do I remember this movie from? I was over Lord of War. Like basically, he was talking about like the business is always in dollars, drachmas, and British pounds. And okay, that's one aspect because I'm feeling the very same thing. I mean, I'm between worlds, between China and America. This probably what's happening is probably the worst possible case in terms of feeling like locked in some racial crisis now, where you're sort of like bouncing. Okay, that's more of a curiosity question than anything. But you're okay. I'm trying to understand where you are right now. You got your manager at Goat, but you also have Hype. And how does that correlate together right now? You're an investor and a manager at the same time, or?
Yeah. Maybe I can just brief it.
Okay.
I'll give a quick brief. So 3 years ago, me and my partner, we took. So what we did is we had a concept. The idea was that venture capital has got it backwards. So venture capitalists think that they take their money, which is a commodity, right, and then give it to good founders in exchange for equity, and that equity grows and they can cash it on it. But the problem is that good founders and good businesses won't you have to line up to get their equity, right? And so traditional VC capitalists, they think they're actually on the buy side of the business, but actually investing is a sell side business. So you should actually be selling your capital, not like, don't expect people to want your capital. Anybody who wants your capital, that equity probably isn't worth having. So from my perspective and my partner's perspective, we are a venture builder. So what we do is we help successful companies expand into new markets with very, very stringent KPIs. And these KPIs are rooted in true business growth. A lot of the times that's money in the bank account.
Right.
And once we achieve those growth goals, then you give me an investment allocation. So that's why we have been able to squeeze our way into a multitude of great deals that even the best investors in the world have not been able to negotiate.
Wow, that is okay. I'm gonna need to chew on that for a second. Wow. Okay, that is pretty interesting. So you're essentially okay. Got it. That's fascinating.
So at the moment,
How did you see that? How did you see that working at Airbnb? I didn't see that working at Airbnb.
Oh, it was clear because when I talk to limited partners or people who invest into funds that make investments, let's just take high net worth individuals and family offices all around Asia.
Sure.
From the 80s till now, their primary investment vehicle has been their own core business, and secondly has been real estate, both commercial and residential real estate.
Very true.
But they haven't been able to, only recently in the last 10, 15 years, have they been diversifying beyond real estate and giving it to, managers to say, hey, I want you to invest into companies.
Very true.
But those money managers, which we'll just call fund managers for now, are really silly because those fund managers typically don't add value to founders. What they do is they try and they really want to squeeze their way into deals, but they don't, right? They really just have strong deployment pressure. Because a way a fund works is, let's say you have a $50 million fund. It's a 10-year fund, but you only have 5 years to invest it. So how many great deals can you really get into? That's a hard question. So let's imagine Airbnb at its pinnacle in 2019 or 2017. It was at that time, if you were the richest family in Asia and you wanted to invest into Airbnb, it's very unlikely that you could.
Right.
However, if you went to Brian and said, hey, I can unlock China for you and turn it into $1 billion market and bring on 1 million new hosts, in exchange, you give me, an investment allocation at a discount, he'd be like, yes, absolutely, I'll do it. So that's the genesis of our business model.
Is that what you guys did?
We did that for a lot of companies in the last 3 years, not Airbnb.
Oh wow. Okay. Wow. Geez. Wow. Okay. So that's what you've been really working on. I mean, when I read the LinkedIn or the website, I don't get that, right? I just get like okay. All right. Wow, that's fascinating. On a tangential question, what are the KPIs that you're looking for to prove business growth? Okay, money in the bank, but other than that,
so it really depends on the partnering company. So I'll give a couple examples.
Sure.
So we did an elderly care business, and that one was it's a service provider. So they provide elderly care or ADL, assisted daily living, to elderly people.
Okay.
And our main KPI was hours of care given. So how many quality hours of care can we give? Right, in a particular market expansion. In Goat, for example, we're primarily an e-commerce platform, so we're selling shoes. So the KPI is going to be average order value plus number of orders.
Got it.
And another one is Circus. We did it was an enterprise. It was a marketing software business, and that one was how many events could we actually complete, right? So every time it's very, very different. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Wow, that's really cool. You're thinking about it from a systematic level. You're assigning value to that particular output, and then you're selling it. Okay. All right. Completely turning it the other way around. I never thought about that way. That's like, yeah. What you don't know, right? Okay. I had a few questions here, but I guess the selfish question for me at this point is: do you think Chinese travelers are in a hurry to travel again? I mean, based on what you can see, or what sort of perspective you have of the Chinese market? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Chinese are very eager to travel. I just learned that flight tickets to Xinjiang have been the most expensive in recent history.
No way.
The reason is, it's just because there's been such a demand for Chinese travelers in major cities to go out that direction because they can't go anywhere else, right? And from a sentiment perspective, everybody's just really waiting to leave. Now, where they go, I don't imagine it to change that much, meaning that what was popular a year ago in terms of tourist destinations should probably still be the same. But I will say there has been one thing that's changed, and I think from a traveler sentiment is, Chinese are very traditional in a way, in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And they really, really care about safety. So, and both physical safety, but also from like safety from the virus thing, and they tend to really look into and say, hey, is this country or is this system safe for me to travel into, right? So that's another variable that will come to play.
Okay, that kind of behaves like in a way like Singapore then, high safety values in East Asian. Okay, all right, I've seen that happen a few times. Long time ago, actually, we had this discussion about, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but there was you had a really interesting discussion. I think we had a discussion, maybe it was in Hong Kong or back somewhere, and you told me that, maybe it was in Bali when you came to visit for Hennik's wedding, but you told me that the short-term rental industry was already finished, that basically there's no more ways of getting into that market because there's a certain sort of financial understanding between developers, hotels, and such. From what I understood was that instead of somebody investing in building a hotel, they could simply create some sort of management partnership with an apartment block owner. They could somehow get a more effective, like it would be cheaper than owning a hotel, but they would actually produce more profit.
I think I vaguely remember that topic, but I was only referring to China. So,
okay.
I mean, the way I see the STR market has evolved in China is that fundamentally there's been a convergence. So when the regular hosts that you and I were hired to go grab, right? The empty nesters, right?
Yeah.
Those guys are long gone. I mean, sorry, they're not long gone, but they are like a drop in the pond in terms of the volume of hosts, right? So when that unraveled, meaning that the big companies of the world and the businessmen, the opportunists in China saw that, hey, Chinese and foreigners are actually very willing to live in regular homes
Uh-huh.
at near hotel level costs, right? Then what happened was it made professional hosts, people who would go sublease, right? And that was phase one. But then phase two quickly was, okay, I'm going to take it one level further. I'm going to go refurbish an entire hotel and turn it all into short-term rental apartments, right? And that was phase two. Phase three is hotels basically listing onto short-term rental. I mean, a hotel is a short-term rental.
Yes. So
Yeah.
what happened in that phase? Okay, phase two and phase three is kind of interesting actually for us because we've looked at, let's say, the Sonder model, right? There was a few brands back then in the US that were doing phase two type thing. They would rent a space and they would then go out. But they've all been kind of dying right now because they're attached on these long-term leases that drain capital. But what happened in the phase three? So what, like hotels what is that happening? Okay, is the phase two problem happening in the US also happening in China? Are people who have essentially been using a merchant model to do short-term rentals, are they getting hurt if there's nobody traveling, or are they still able to find sufficient capital to let that business model work?
I think it's different. I think if you're in the short-term rental space, the smartest way to do it is you do not spend capital expenditure to sign a 5-year lease, to refurbish, to do any of that, right? You really want to prioritize flexibility. And I think those are the most profitable landlords. Sorry, those are the most profitable operators in the world. In the STR space, whether you're in Bali, whether you're in America or China. But in the last few years, you saw players like Sonder and other players come in and say, "Hey, I'm going to do long-term rental with a short-term kicker, right? And whenever I can't do it, I'm gonna do long-term rental. I'm gonna use short-term rental to fill in the gaps, right? And then I'm going to target global travelers who, when they leave to New York on business trip, they can flip a switch and turn their apartment into an Airbnb, and then they can rev share
that's Saunders' model. Okay, got it. I thought it was completely different. I thought it was like they would merge.
Many players are doing that.
Okay, got it.
Okay. But here's the problem, right?
Sure.
If you compare that model to the first model, which is not having that capital expenditure, but having 20 properties under 20 different leases all around the city, which one's more flexible? Of course, the first one, not the Sonder one, because no matter what, you're locked in, right, for that one. So that's my perspective on it. And to be honest, I think the only reason those big players have been able to raise significant capital is, unfortunately, I think it's because of packaging. It's more of a branding play. It's equity. It's brand equity. It's not profitability. Right?
I would happen to agree with that. We've talked to a few people from the traditional lease apartment world. There are companies like Blue Ground and Bridge Street, and they said that these Sonder companies, they did exactly what we did, but they just packaged it more for a millennial friendly. Exactly what your conclusion was too as well. Okay, wow, that's and stage three, phase three, when the hotels start coming in, what happened to the previous people who were doing phase one and phase two?
I think they're still. I mean, at least in China, they're definitely still on the platform. They're still making great money.
Okay.
I think hotels are perhaps they got a little too excited. They thought that perhaps short-term rental could be the gap filler that they really needed. But it really depends. I'm not sure if hotels really think platforms like Airbnb are big generators for them. Sorry.
Okay. We were thinking about some integrating our business over to hotels at some point. So that's why I asked. Okay. I'm going to ask you some other questions that are more sort of China related, just in general, right? Because I'm curious. I keep on getting the feeling that China is like a few years ahead of the world Like if you go to China and you see it happening there, you can kind of assume that a few years later, the rest of the world will start adopting it. Kind of like Silicon Valley back in, I think, 2012. If you went there and you saw what was happening, social media, Uber, all these things, and pretty soon, a few years later, it happened everywhere. Um, this was a good question. So I was listening to your talk on the 1% project, and you did mention that like registration things are getting easier in China. It's easier to just go in and
Yeah.
slap down and get your business registered, but also the local competition side is getting harder. Are there any other things that you think are essentially headwinds or tailwinds in this process? Like what is like a force that's working with you if you're trying to get into China? What's a force that's working against you if you're trying to get into China besides, let's say, registration and local competition?
As a foreign company?
Yeah, sure. As a foreign company.
Yeah, I think the headwinds are going to be, um, unfortunately, it's still a very Chinese language country.
Of course.
So there's just literally no way to get around that.
Of course, yeah.
You would need a very local team and somebody you can really trust. The second headwind is, my understanding in Indonesia is for a foreigner to set up a business there, you would need a local director.
Yeah,
Right?
sort of. Yeah. My wife is my local director. Wait, my wife and one of our oldest employees are our directors. Yeah, but
Gotcha. So,
it's more for, I guess, registration purposes. Yeah.
yeah, so in China, it's fairly similar, except that you have a mechanism or a vehicle called a WOFE, a wholly foreign owned enterprise. And as a wholly foreign owned enterprise, you would need a foreign entity to own a you would need a foreign entity to set up a China WOFE. And so you could be the director of a China WOFE, but it has to be owned by a foreign entity, right? And that system is very robust, and you can inject foreign capital, foreign direct investment into it and use it. However, it's very tricky. There are restrictions to how you use that foreign capital that you injected in. The banking processes, the setup processes, the accounting processes are a little convoluted, and you would need a good accountant to work with you on that. So that's a headwind. Other headwinds is if you are in the space. So China is really cares about the movement of people internally.
I
Right?
noticed that. Yeah, you need to produce your passport whenever you go to the train station.
Yeah. And they really care about the movement of people, not just for local citizens, but also for foreigners. So if you're in the travel space, let's take your business, for example. If you were to get into China, if you reach a certain level of scale, it's very important that you register every single foreign traveler that ever stays on your property.
Yeah.
You know, so there's just many headwinds. So some of the tailwinds I think are well, the ceiling is just so high.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the ceiling is so high; it's almost infinite because not just because the volume of consumers is so high, but because their income is increasing. And not only is their income increasing, their propensity to spend is increasing.
Right.
So you have a trifecta of situations in which you remember America in the 90s and early 2000s. The world called America the world's consumer, right?
Yeah.
And now China is becoming the world's consumer.
And
so
it'll be a much bigger one too, by many orders of magnitude.
Yeah. So I think that's what we're seeing in China. That's the primary tailwind.
That's really funny because I remember talking with one of my contacts, Siki Chen. He's funded by Andreessen Horowitz, and he told me this thing about venture capitalists only want to hear one thing. They want to hear you say, you know what, this idea probably won't work, but if it does, it's going to be the biggest thing in the world, right? And from that perspective, it sounds like you're in the right place, and the whole world should be going to China if that's the case, right? Because it's like where the big pot of gold is at the end of the rainbow. Okay, wow. Are there any other sort of tailwinds that you see? Everything is hard, but the prize is extremely worthwhile.
Hey, it's a little staticky
Yeah, I'm trying to
when you
figure out
talk.
what that is. Yeah. Wait, let me try miking off. Yeah, it could be. Well, how about now?
Oh yeah, that fixed it. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you good now. Okay,
Oh yeah.
it's coming back.
Some of the tailwinds is I think Chinese. Another one tailwind is in terms of consumer behavior is Chinese are not the Chinese are ready and willing and in need. They have the requirement for foreign goods. They love foreign goods. A great example is Tesla. I mean, it's just one of hundreds of examples, but this is the one I was talking to my buddy about earlier yesterday. Tesla started the big Gigafactory outside Shanghai,
Yes.
and it produces only the Model 3s, right? And that Model 3 is pure China made. And that Model 3 is selling for 300,000 RMB. And if you buy one, you get a free license plate. And a license plate can be up to 30% of the cost. So anyways, it's a fantastic deal. But the problem is that the quality control on that Model 3 is at the moment not up to snuff compared to the global Model 3 in America. And Chinese know that. There's plenty of Weibo posts, there's plenty of really, really long, in-depth reviews of the Chinese Model 3. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures. In fact, there's a joke that says that the distance between the door panels is so large that you can squeeze trash into it. So effectively, Chinese are still buying it, but they understand the differences, and that's why you would have that's why there's a lot of room for growth for foreign brands to come in here.
Got it. Okay, that's pretty interesting. I thought you were going to tell me that they would then go buy the American Model 3 even with all the benefits or something to it. Like they would be so they would prefer actually the Fremont. That's crazy. Actually, Teslas are made back in my home city. It's the only thing that Fremont is actually known for. Okay, I get it. I saw that. I kind of witnessed it also in Bali. There's a lot of, let's say in Indonesia, most of the kopi luwak and the bird's nests are consumed by Chinese consumers. There's this obsession with getting like the best of whatever that country has to offer,
Yeah.
which is pretty interesting. Okay. Um, yeah, I still noticed that static. But,
It's weird.
yeah, okay. Let's see. Okay, I don't hear it anymore. But okay, I was going to ask you another question about hiring in China. When you hire in China, and you're one of the most perfect people to ask because you actually have you spend time in the States too as well. What sort of are some things that you see that are strengths and proficiencies, some things that are weaknesses, and about team balance? Is there anything that you see differently about, let's say, the I don't know. Actually, wait. Let me skip that question. I got even a more to the point question that sort of kicks that a little bit even further. I talked to Ray Ma, who's one of my college classmates. She was at 500 startups in China, and she mentioned that most Chinese entrepreneurs never graduate from the top universities, and she had her thoughts on why that happened. But I'm curious, what sort of are the common attributes that you find in Chinese entrepreneurs that American entrepreneurs don't have, and vice versa, like based on what you've seen there?
I think if we just limit the conversation, if we limit this topic to technology companies for a moment,
Okay.
I think the biggest difference I see is that Chinese entrepreneurs treat startups, technology startups that they start, as a business, and Americans may treat it as a startup. you know, like let me expand on that for a moment.
Okay.
Like,
Sure.
yeah, when the guy who didn't graduate from the top universities in China, right?
Right.
He is an opportunist. Like he wakes up thinking, how do I make money? He doesn't wake up thinking, how do I produce? let's say he has an idea for a company. He might say, okay, I think this is the product that the market or this segment of the market requires, right? And whatnot. But his mentality is very much business focused, meaning he's thinking, how do I monetize it, right? How do I get people to pay for it? How do I get people to do I have to do returns, right? What is the profit margin on this for whatnot? But one of the trends I've seen in America is, I think a lot of pioneers and first time startup folk in America is more involved in the idea of offering a new service or product to the market, but not thinking about their company as a business. Like, they're not necessarily businessmen or businesswomen. You know, they're thinking about it from a almost like a pioneer or an inventor perspective, but like a more creative way, right? But Chinese are very, in Chinese we call it 接地气, is like super down to earth, you know, and down to earth, like the salt of the earth kind of guy. Like, he really is just there to make money.
You got it. Make a business. That was hilarious, actually, because Vidya and I were just talking about a similar topic, and it was revolved in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, there's there's another dimension. So there's business. And no, wait, Vidya, I'll let you actually explain it. It was probably better in your own way. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So in Indonesia, actually, like my family, they own like a local business, and I can see the difference, the distinction between the mindset between this term called like business and retail. In Indonesia, we call it like business and dagang. It's like retail, like small business. I think in like the business mindset, you kind of think about longevity and also like how to exist and get market share, like market acquisition, and so on and so forth. But for local business and retails, they think of how to make money today, to continue to make money like in the short term, stuff like that. So that's one of the difference, and what creates quite a conflict between us and our partners. Let's say when we try to convince them regarding our strategies. When we think about long term, they think about short term, something like that.
Which is at a completely different level as well. Rob, in this particular dimension, you've seen both sides. Which side do you think wins, or is there just a different circumstance, or what works better? Is this like kind of like a WeWork versus a sort of a Meituan, or how would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's one side better than the other, but I will say in terms of, I think both sides are solving different problems. In China, they're solving the consumer needs problem. So consumers need microwaves, and they're going to go solve that. Consumers need laundry service, so they're going to go solve that, right? But in America, yeah, I think in the early days of technology revolution, like, they were solving that. The age old saying, like, hey, what does my neighbor need? And I'm going to go build a business around that, you know? But more and more, I think there's one really great benefit and advantage that America has, is because they're thinking more about, as your colleague says, longevity, right? That means they're also thinking about the vision. So they're thinking about, what does the world need in 10 years, right? And that gives way to things like iPhones and electric cars and self-driving trucks and solar panels and all this stuff. And you're not going to see that in China, because there's not 500 million Chinese that want solar panels. Rather, they want they want an affordable car. So, yeah.
Okay, I get it. That actually kind of makes sense. Yeah, what you said was actually resonate. So America believes more in research and development ideas, and China believes in more, like, let's say, things that have more of a tangible benefit. Okay, all right. Would that be an accurate conclusion, or am I missing some nuances there?
No, I think that's right. I think if I can give another example of vegetarianism.
Oh yeah, tell me more. Yeah, I'm curious.
It's a cool concept to think about and ponder. So I personally don't believe that China is going to be the vegetarian. Like, it's not going to catch on.
Mhm.
the reason is because, how do I put this sensitively? In America, in the West, right? We grew up eating steak.
Yeah.
And we had access to really good beef, right?
Yeah.
And it tastes delicious.
Yes.
And now that I've seen enough Netflix documentaries, I realize that, hey, eating beef is not great for the environment, right? And it's also not great for my gut, and it's not good for my stomach and all stuff.
Right.
And even if the average Chinese were to know that, right?
Uh-huh.
And even if they had, even if they knew all the benefits of not eating meat and to eat vegetables, they still won't do it. The reason is because they only in the recent 5 to 8 years have they been able to eat that steak, right?
Yeah.
So from even I'm in the same boat for them, like as them. I believe that, hey, you guys in the West had decades of experience eating steak, and my turn to eat steak, you know? and then once I've had enough of my steak, I will consider, veganism later, right? So so you guys keep doing that.
This is perfect because this was actually my next question, which was the cultural locus of the world, right? And I was very curious about, like, okay, so that's a perfect example of the cultural locus, I think, being in the West, right? So people, and Chinese people are aspiring to do what Westerners did, but like 10, 20 years ago. But what I'm seeing is actually, do you think the cultural locus will originate from the East now? Well, Westerners want to do what Chinese people are doing today, like paying for goods using, like, I don't know, like using, like, not carrying a wallet, right? Or just having their public transportation work correctly, or anything like that. Like, do you see that could happen?
I think we should distinguish that quality of life improvements will be adopted, and cultural exportation will likely not be adopted. But QR scanning to make payments is not a cultural exportation. It's more of a quality of life enhancement.
Got it.
But to answer the question, I do think that as China becomes more and more present on the world stage, both from a commercial and from a cultural perspective,
Yeah.
I think we're going to get a lot of pushback on the side.
On the cultural side, yeah. I've noticed that too. It's really hard to bridge that. Yeah. I've noticed it's really hard. Even though I myself, being from both cultures, I see a lot of intersection, but the media will never, not no media will even acknowledge this. I've gone on, like, NPR, Fox News, CNN, and it always vilifies China. Like, but I remember when I was growing up, and America was doing this very same thing for Japan. Like, they were happy trading with Japan, but Japan is going to be, like, where we're going to have our World War III incident emerge from, and Japan's going to be like the enemy, and all this military flexing to show that we can kick Japan's ass. And I'm seeing that sort of play again, which is not the best thing. I mean, it's okay. So culture, it will be okay. All right, interesting. That's okay. And then I guess the final thing, back to sort of labor force. You've recruited a lot. You've managed people in China. What have you seen as being, like, let's say, strengths in Chinese talent? Maybe that are particular, and proficiencies. What do you think are weaknesses, and what does it take to balance a team?
Mm, mm. Well, I mean, I think a lot of this is well known already, but Chinese really have a really strong work ethic. Um, I think Chinese really care and are proud of their job. Especially in big cities, and in technology industries. I would say all the big industries, I think people are quite proud of their work and they take pride in it and they work hard. I say that if one issue, I guess, I think that having a good balance of East and West and having a variety of different personalities is always important. So the age-old concern was that, Chinese are really like they learn through regurgitation and that they take instruction, right? But they don't necessarily think creatively. and they don't take stuff like that. And I think at some point in history that may have resonated a little bit, but that has changed so fast, changed so incredibly quickly. And I don't think that's a way to describe the modern day Chinese youth as workforce today. I think they are incredibly creative, and I think they're hardworking, and they have strong work ethics. And in the West, I would say, yeah, they're always mission driven. It's not a job. It's not about work. It's about meaningful work. And you saw that a lot at Airbnb and every other tech company that tries to incentivize you through a vision. And I don't know if that goes really far in China. I think personal mission in China is very short to medium term, meaning that we need to buy a house because I'm going to get married in 5 years. So it's not about like, hey, I want to revolutionize travel. It's more about like, hey, while we revolutionize travel, I need to save enough money to put a down payment on my house.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Much more practical. Yeah. Okay. I think you helped me actually, Rob, unlock I think, Vidi, actually, I'd like to pass this over to you. Do you think the same actually, or what side do you think Indonesia lies on? Is it more kind of like on the West or more on the Chinese side or different altogether?
Yeah, I think because Indonesia is also an Asian country, we tend to share similar virtues in terms of looking the way we look at jobs as the Chinese. Um, we tend to look at what we can achieve in terms of financial stability, and not regarding that like idealistic point of view that Western countries like workforce have.
Okay, got it. Wow.
Very few of them actually have that kind of idealistic view in Indonesia, especially.
I think, wow, okay, that hit upon a nail, Rob. Yeah, I just had something resonate. When I watched that Netflix documentary about that, the guy who opened the factory in America, I think he had like a Chinese glass.
Yeah, I saw it. American
You saw
Factory.
it? Yeah, that's it. And that all of a sudden just boom, yeah, like the American workers are like, this isn't according to our vision, we need to be treated this way. And the Chinese guy was like very practical. He was like, yo, I've given you this already. And I could, yeah, wow. Okay, that highlights that. Okay. That pretty much sums it up. I think I got like a lot of good takes out of this. Rob, is there anything that you'd like to know about us? I don't know about Indonesia.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Of course, man. I mean, you guys are in the hospitality industry in Indonesia,
Yes,
but you guys got your roots and the genesis was in Bali, right?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And do you feel like Bali is like really separate from the rest of Indonesia in some ways? Like talk to me about that and how does that affect you guys as a business?
Wow, I could go on for ages about that. Vidi, you're nodding your head. What do you think? Vidi's Indonesian. I'm
Yeah,
really Indonesian at this.
that's actually very interesting because when people like I've noticed a lot of my expat teachers in high school when they mentioned that they had holiday in Indonesia like vacation they refer to Bali because the culture is very different there, right? They're more liberal in a sense. Other islands, especially in the islands of Java and Sumatra, like the west part of Indonesia, are more conservative, and like culturally, it's very different. And in terms of industry, it's very specific, right? In Bali, in Java Island, maybe you focus on manufacturing. In Bali, their level of hospitality is just very different. It's like on the peak of the peak of hospitality in Indonesia for Bali.
Probably globally. It does.
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. I ask because like I feel like it's also very different, and I think I mean, I'm not Indonesian, but I just feel like it's so the culture of Bali, whether we talk about domestic culture before it became a tourism hub, and the culture it is now especially now has been very different than the status quo or the norm culture of the rest of Indonesia,
Mhm.
and how does the government feel about this distinguishment, like this, like, do they treat Bali and say, hey, I'm going to use this as almost as like, I can understand the value it's bringing our country, whether it's from like a GMV perspective, or sorry, a GDP perspective. But then is there any um, disalignment in terms of culture, and say, hey, we have to find a rationale and say it's this way because GDP it serves a purpose. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Got it. Wow, that's a pretty good question. I'll take a stab at that. So, what I know about Bali, Vidi, please correct me if I'm wrong, right? Because I did read some books on Indonesian history. The actual sort of, if you look at the culture and the evolution of Indonesian history, it started actually first, I think, as a Buddhist kingdom, and then as a Hindu kingdom.
I think Hindu came first, sir.
Hindu came first. Okay,
Yeah.
Hinduism came first, then Buddhism, and eventually Islam took over. And what you see actually in Indonesia, I think, is it's actually a really interesting. Rob, okay, you're okay. This is a good time to explain it. You know, in China, when you go to a temple and you ask, "What's the history of this temple?" and they'll tell you, "Right now, this is actually the Communist Party headquarters, but before that, it used to be like a Taoist temple, and before that, it was a Confucian temple, and before that, it was like some sort of
Yeah.
animist temple, right?" So what I've seen actually in Asia, and this happens quite a lot, I get the feeling that, let's say, religion is almost a guest and culture is the host, right? In Europe, it's very much the opposite. I believe that in Europe and America, religion is the host and culture is a guest. So you have the constant stream of culture sort of passing through, but the religion is the core. Whereas in Asia, I really like through my experience in Indonesia, um, through my understanding of Islam, let's say from the limited encounters I've had in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world, this is the most, let's say, light practice I've seen. It's like I would say almost the most casual practice. So what the common, I feel like the common culture of people have in common is far greater than, let's say, whatever sort of maybe is the religion at the moment. But it's like the racial question in America too. Not that maybe
Yeah.
edit this out of the topic. It's like the racial question in America too. It surfaces, and when it surfaces, it gets, everyone gets crazy about it, right? But like on a day-to-day level, I wouldn't say it guides policy or such. So
Okay. No. I get it. I ask because like I'm trying to correlate that to other tourist or to other places where there was a local culture and then foreigners came. So for example, let's take Dubai, for example.
mhm,
Dubai as very foreign, a lot of foreigners there, right? But it's very much foreigners living in a local culture. And in Singapore, it's very much foreigners living in a local culture.
yeah.
Like, I'm not talking about the Malaysians or the Indians in Singapore. I'm talking about the Americans and the Germans and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
But in Bali, is it foreigners living in a local culture, or are they terraforming it?
That's a good question. All right. Video. I think I'll take a stab at that one. Right. I'm laughing, Rob, because there's a place about. I think maybe you were here last time in Canggu, and Canggu's exploded since the last time you've seen it. It is the best way is to call it. It's terraforming. It's honestly
I
like
believe it.
an alien ship from Australia landed and just started turning everything that was rice paddy into a hipster cafe. So in that sense, I've thought about that deeper, and I wondered what's happening in Canggu. Essentially, oh, okay, Rob's video is out there. Hey, Rob, can you? Okay. Essentially, what I see is this piece of Bali is becoming a platform as a city. So, what does that mean? So, you can come with any idea you want. You can plant your flag there, and if it grows, it grows, and it starts kind of like taking on its own community and its own life. You almost can say that, like it's almost like soil for any type of seed. whether that's a foreign seed from any part of the world, plant it in Canggu. If it grows, great, it grows and it becomes amazing. If it doesn't, then the Balinese are sort of in this funny position right now in Canggu, where in a business perspective, they're pretty wise because they own the platform, right? So they're pretty happy about this. Businesses come and go, but they still get paid rent for their land, which is awesome. But what I'm also seeing is Balinese culture is fairly strong. I think the values and locus of what Balinese people consider to be valuable is very self-contained. It's beginning to go outside. It's beginning to be like, okay, I'll wear Uniqlo clothes. I'll wear like I'll kind of adopt some Western practices, but it's still very rooted, I think, in local values. But it is terraforming, I think, and if you go back to Indonesian history, I think they anticipated this would happen, and that's why the government moved all the tourism to Bali in the very beginning. They didn't want terraforming to happen because the other way to call it is colonialization, right? So, so when this starts happening, people start. This kind of reminds me when the Dutch were here, but
Yeah.
but I think this time it's different also because I think there's a lot more the West. They're very idea driven. It's like veganism, yoga, and
Yeah.
there's this harmonious correlation with Balinese culture anyway.
Energy.
Yeah, there's synergy there. So that part of it works pretty well. I think in other places, let's say Singapore, I felt like Singapore was. I didn't really know what Singapore culture was after a while because it was like Singapore culture seems to go to work, drink after work, and then sleep and then go do it again. Yeah? And then on the weekends kind of hang out with the family. It seemed like a perfect suburban culture. And I couldn't even tell what was the difference between that and living in Fremont for that matter. But yeah,
That's interesting. Yeah.
that okay. Well, hopefully does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I also ask because I don't know if you know Hainandao in China is
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
You think it's
I
going to
think
be
they're gonna. No. I think when they put together that legislature, they took a lot of learnings from Bali. If I were them, I would take a lot of learnings from Bali.
what's the population of Heighten?
I have no idea. Like 10 million, maybe 20 million.
So pretty significant to actually have. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
A lot of I think Balinese culture originally, Vidya, if I'm not mistaken, comes from Java roots anyway. So I've noticed that people in Indonesia, I feel like they feel some nostalgia when they come to Bali. Like maybe the way that if you're American, you feel nostalgia when you visit New Orleans. You're like, oh yeah, this is kind of the way that America or Boston. You can kind of feel that. That's just part of where we used to come from, as our culture. Maybe we don't do it anymore, but it feels familiar and comfortable at the same time. But
Cool.
okay, all right, cool, good stuff. All right, I'll stop the recording now. I think we've kind of reached the conclusion there. And how's